Welcome to The Final Edit, a podcast brought to you by Maison, a private network for 7 to 9 figure female founders where women redefine success, legacy, and influence.
We're your hosts, Maritza and Hannah Nieves. We're co-founders, mothers, and builders behind a billion-dollar vision.
These conversations are with leading founders who are shaping the industry and the future as they build it.
Welcome to The Final Edit. Welcome to another episode of The Final Edit. Everyone talks about the identity shift of becoming an entrepreneur, but nobody talks about the one that happens after you've already made it, when the version of yourself that built everything starts to feel not enough for what's next. That's what we're getting into today.
I love this conversation because after talking to members almost every single day of every single week, this comes up all the time. And I think for a lot of people listening in, whether you're earlier on in your journey or, you have an 8-9 figure business, that you're constantly shedding a version of you that's not going to get you to that next level. And I think it's really interesting because even in Maison, we have women who are generating like 7, 8, and 9 figure businesses a year. And this is the biggest conversation that comes up. So I think I would love to get your perspective on this, even in your own experience of building Maison.
Yeah, I think that there's this myth that once you build a certain type of business or you hit a revenue number that your identity crises just stop. And that is exactly that. It is just a myth. It's almost like they get a little bit worse because you're like, wait, am I at the right place to actually hold what I have just accomplished? And so you start kind of questioning your identity even more. And so I feel like for me, I have definitely felt that, especially with building Maison, because I have historically had brands where I have not needed to be very public facing. And my comfort has always been in being behind the scenes, being a quote unquote best kept secret, right? And so with Maison, I have had to really put myself out there in ways that have felt very uncomfortable. And I've had to carry, my identity has had to match the identity of the brand.
Ooh.
And that has been hard. That was definitely something that I struggled with a lot in the beginning. I would definitely, and Hannah would always say, own your power. She literally all the time would just look over at me. And I feel like she could just see, when I was like having a moment or I was in my head or I was like feeling like, okay, where am I versus like where the brand is. And she would always say, own your power. And that would kind of bring me back to life. And I would say that where we are now, I am definitely more in my own my power era. And I'm confident in my role. I'm confident in, where I am and where the brand is. But it definitely took a while to get here. So I'm very curious if anybody else can relate or if, that was just like a Maritza story.
I really feel that so deeply too, because even for me, I was always known as the PR girl. I always was a person that, traded my time for the services that I offered and, really built a brand around that. But then going from that to, being CEO of a network and a community and letting that go was very difficult. It was very difficult. And for those that are maybe new or from the past too, I had multiple brands and I was always known to have my hands in multiple buckets, but to go in on this one thing, it really was like a whole identity shift. I remember for 6 months, I don't think I posted like barely anything. And I remember I would go to you and be like, what am I saying? But I think what's interesting is that, at 7, 8, and 9 figures, like you are the brand. And, when you start to evolve, it's not just you, it can actually have an impact on the business. And it can in a good or bad way too, right? Because like to your point, like you can be the best kept secret, but you could be doing your brand a disservice, right? By being behind the scenes. And, for what we're trying to build, it's like, we are in a noisy market. We are in a market that when we started this idea 3 years ago, there were no women's networks on this caliber for this particular person structured in this way. And now I can think of a multitude of them that have come through over the last few years. And so it's actually like our responsibility for the brand to show up in that way.
Absolutely. And I also want to touch on that grief that
Mhm.
we all feel when some of us plan to outgrow a version of ourselves, right, in order to catapult to whatever's next. But for those of us where it just happens, right, or it's part of the
Mhm.
circumstance, and or the brand requires it, there is a certain kind of grief that comes with outgrowing an old version of yourself and
Mhm.
realizing, like, wait a second, I don't have the same opinion that I used to, or the things that, used to feel really important or really heavy, like they don't weigh on me as they should. And
Mhm.
I am now, in a different place. And this is oftentimes, I think, a signal for knowing that you're in this era of evolution is you start to feel that the conversations in rooms that you're in, like they just don't hit the same anymore, right? And
Mhm.
you're like, okay, wait a second, like why is this happening? And then you start kind of questioning if it's you, or you simply are just not, in that same place anymore. And now you need to be in more
Mhm.
expansive spaces that kind of match the level of your thinking today. And so,
Mhm.
but it does cost you, kind of like you have to go through that motion and you have to grieve that old version of yourself. And you do also lose people along the way that maybe
Mhm.
still want you to be the person that you
Mhm.
were 2 years ago. And you're just not that person anymore.
Mhm.
So I want you to touch on that a little bit because I know that you
Mhm.
know that feeling all too well.
Yeah. And that going back to what I was saying before, I was always known as the PR girl, the visibility girl. And I did this for so many people. And I think if I were to be, and this whole podcast is all about being raw and not gatekeeping, but I was always the person that played well in the sandbox, like I was always, very kosher about it. It was like, this is how you do things, XYZ, bring value, but I really didn't put like my stake in the ground on, my thoughts around XYZ topics. And so I think if I were to think about the version of myself then and the version of myself now, well, number one, I'm fighting for a different mission, right? And so that's a whole different conversation. My identity has had to shift. And with that, I've actually lost people. I've lost people who, don't recognize the version of myself now. But to be quite honest, when you are up leveling and when you're quantum leaping, you are naturally going to, make people who might not feel comfortable within their own skin, or maybe there's jealousy and or envy energy behind, what they're doing in the world. You're going to trigger some people. And what I've learned along the way is that as your identity is up leveling and you are quantum leaping, you're going to piss people off. You are going to get haters. And I just saw a post right before this from the CEO of, I think it was Solid Core, and she was talking about how, like, if you cannot feel comfortable with being disliked, like, you are not going to be successful. And damn, that was a lesson
Oh,
that I learned.
that really hits.
That was a lesson that I learned up leveling even my own identity, where I really started to trigger people that weren't safe in their own body, but
Mhm.
wanted to project that towards me. And so if I were to wrap that up, I'm definitely PR and influence is still the name of the game, but we're using it in a different way now, and fighting for different things and just putting our stake in the ground and not feeling like we have to play in the sandbox in the same way.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and that just really resonates. And again, I wonder for you listening in if you feel the same. But there is also this moment where at first you almost like really want to be liked, especially when
mhm.
you are a public figure,
Yes.
and you're representing your brand. You don't want to ruffle feathers, and then you realize that that's not realistic and that's not life. And really, when you are responsible for the livelihood of others, the expectations of your members. If you, for example, are in a business model like ours and you really are, you switch to this business brain, you're responsible for driving the bottom line of your business. I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter if you like me or not.
Mhm.
I still have to do what I have to do. My
Mhm.
responsibilities don't change just because you don't like me or because
Mhm.
I rubbed you the wrong way or you don't like the way that I say something, you don't like the way that I dress, like
Mhm.
whatever, those are your kind of feelings
Mhm.
and it does take a while to get there. But I also feel that that is a signal like the day that you wake up and you're like, you know what? I could care less
Mhm.
what anybody thinks about me. Like, I'm just going to go on and do my thing. I feel like that is an up level in and of itself. And that's
Mhm.
too how like, okay, I'm ready to be in a different room. I'm ready to be in a room where people are cheering me on. People are cheering on that attitude as well, because that to me is a telltale sign of
Mhm.
you being in the wrong room
Yeah.
if people are trying to keep you small. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you tell people, like, hey, I don't care if I'm liked, and they're like, hell yeah, sister, that's when you know that you are in the
Mhm.
right place. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it's so many different layers, to your identity and how that shifts and scales the more you grow in business. And if
Mm.
you tell me, like, hey, well, I'm not aiming, to go from 7 to 8
Yeah.
figures or from 8 to 9, that's a completely different story, right? Like your identity could just stay the same in that place, but most of the women that we're talking to, right, like they're building their brands for massive impact, world changing impact, and so their identity is very much tied, to these different levels of life and
Mhm.
business.
Ooh, keeping the same conversation around identity, like you just talked about how you had to really come to, your own shift and own quantum leap around getting visible. And as someone who's also spent 20 years in technology, how has that quantum leap, like, what did that look like for you? Because you've been like, it's been night and day from when we first started working together to now, and even just how you're showing up even in like our own like relationship as it relates to
Mhm.
visibility. Like, how did that shift for you?
Yeah, I think that for me, it it just became obvious that I needed to be comfortable in what I bring to the table.
Mhm.
And I have always felt out of place in every room and environment that I have been in. One, as a woman of color, as a woman of color in tech, as an immigrant woman of color, as a woman. I mean, it's like just checks all the boxes.
Mhm.
And so I've always felt like I didn't belong, even though I had big thoughts and big dreams and big visions. And I was afraid to share, my voice and my take on things from fear of rejection. And
Mhm.
so once I did that work again, and it's all tied to the, well, I rather get to that one person that resonates with what I'm saying,
Mhm.
or the one person that looks just like me, that needs to see women like me in this seat. When I just focus on that, it helped me to transcend into my role. And it really just came with, it's like any career, right? When you first start a job, you're like, okay, I need to learn the ropes. I need to understand, the who's who.
Mhm.
And so once I got comfortable in my role, right, going from a founder of her own agency, leading her own team, to now being a co founder and co leading and co creating everything. Once I found my own step in that rhythm, then I just felt more comfortable and confident in
Mhm.
my identity.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit about why being in the right room matters when you are going through an identity transition. And this is where, again, Maison is something that is so intentional, but also so important and critical for women at this level. Because, like I said, a lot of our women are going through these shifts of, shifting their identity. They're starting new companies, they're exiting companies, going, sitting in corporate board roles. And so the conversation around identity actually comes up a lot. And I think what's so interesting, exactly what you said, is, being in a room where women women are not only thinking big, but they're going to call you out on your shit if you are playing
Mhm.
small. And I think that's what something that's really, really powerful about Maison specifically. And going back to what you said before, it's like if you're in rooms or if you're in groups where, the people around you are not even just like playing small, but they're gossiping about other people. They are, envious of other people. They are talking down or bad about other people, right? In hopes to leverage their own gain, right? Like you're in the wrong room at the end of the day. And to be honest, there's a lot of those types of rooms out there. So I would love to know, like from your perspective, like what have you seen from our women with identity shifts?
Yes, and I love that question. And it goes back to what I said. When you know you're in the wrong room, you'll be able to tell that the conversation is trying to keep you small, or the person is adding fuel to the fire.
Mhm.
And there's nothing really coming out of the conversation that's helping you grow. There's no different perspective being shared. And honestly, the most important part, in my opinion, is that you're expected to have it all together. If you cannot show up to a room and say, I'm having a hard
Mhm.
effing season, or this
Mhm.
thing happened and I am freaking out because I'm about to lose X million dollars in business. If
Mhm.
you cannot show up transparently in the messy middle or when things are hard, you are in the wrong room. If
Mhm.
people are constantly expecting you to have it all together, to show up with all the answers, to never have a hard season in business, I'm sorry, you've got to walk away. And so that's where I see the most power in Maison is that the women are so transparent. To your point, people are holding you accountable. People are going to tell you, if yes, maybe you are, in a season of evolution, or
Mhm.
maybe you're running away from something. Right? Like
Yeah.
maybe there's something that you're, not facing that you should face. Like maybe it's a conversation with a team member that you need to let go, even if they've been in your company, for X amount
Mhm.
of years. Right. And so you're going to get that level of accountability and that type of conversation. And I think that that's also what makes the room so special.
Yeah. So I would love as we wrap this up, what permission do you wish someone had given you earlier in the process?
That is so good. I think for me, um, it's almost like that you deserve to have nice things.
Yes.
Like that version of that, of like, you absolutely deserve everything that your heart desires. And even if your vision, is so big, like you do deserve that.
Mhm.
You do belong in that big, grandiose dream of yours.
Mhm.
I think if I would have heard that earlier on, actually, you know what? I feel like I've always been really gutsy and have just gone after it. So maybe I did wait a little bit too long to become an entrepreneur, but all of that, was part of my journey and part of my season. But I do wish that I would have understood that concept
Mhm.
earlier on.
Ooh, yeah, I think for me, the permission of just showing up raw and authentic. I think I've always, been that way, but I think being more bold with how I think about things, how I process things, what we're building. And I think just being more bold and fiery on the beliefs that I have. And so that's my permission slip.
I can see that. I can so see that for you, which is why I also think that,
Mhm.
in your identity that you're in now, which is a great, way for us to close. I would love to hear this from you all as well, but I think that because you were showing up previously like to perform, and to
Mhm.
be in that identity of business owner, PR girl, very like regimented, and that was like your whole identity at the time. A part of you that existed in private in terms of like your bold opinions, how you show up confidently and in a way like carefree as well and
Mhm.
funny. I feel like that was missing.
Mhm.
And so now that you have decided, well, this is me and this is my identity, and like I don't want to perform anymore, I just want to show up bold, confident as myself. I think you've seen too, just like pieces from your past start to kind of make their way out as they should.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, like what is this, identity that you're in now that you're still working through? And like I said, to our listeners, I would also love to hear from you, post it in the comments, email us, whatever, like what is like your current identity that isn't in its final draft?
So, where we're at now is the identity of holding $1 billion vision. And I say that with full confidence in what we're building. And I know for some people that might not make them, it can make them feel a certain way. But at the end of the day, I believe so strongly in the mission, the vision of what we're creating with our portfolio, that I just show up boldly. So I think I'm just in that identity of, at the end of the day, like this is who I am, this is what we're building. And I might, piss some people off in the process, and that's also okay. So that's me.
Yeah, I don't know what to call my identity that I'm in right now. I would say it's um I'm just not letting people get away with shit anymore. Like,
Yes.
if push comes to shove, like you will hear from my attorney and
Mhm.
or I'm going to call you out on your shit. And I think that there's a time and a place, right, where some things are worth your time and energy. I definitely, why I think certain I'm also at like a close of an old identity, and leaving people in the past and only wanting to work with a certain type of person as well. And I think it's because once you decide that you are not going to allow, certain behavior from people, um,
Mhm.
it's different. So that's, I don't know what I'm still like marinating through that. I really don't know what identity that is, but it's really, I'm no longer, trying to keep peace for peace sake. And if I need to cut something, I'm going to cut it and I'm going to just keep moving on, and like what
Mhm.
people kind of do or they don't do, what they say or they don't say, just again doesn't affect me because our vision is so big and so important and it's way bigger than us. And
Mhm.
so I can't like get caught up in the
Yeah.
petty.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at.
Oh, this is so good. I feel like we could keep talking about this for hours. But if you have been listening in and you have been enjoying this episode, go ahead and leave us a review. We so appreciate it. It allows us to continue to create this incredible content. And if you've been listening in and wanting to learn more about Maison, click the link below. We'll have a call where you can actually learn a little bit more, see if you'd be a good fit. And we hope to see you on the inside. See you for another episode.
Bye bye.